I'm not actually sure that a dystopia warning has ever been more appropriate. And I say that as someone that spent 14 years horrified at corruption and criminality in the Conservative Party, especially over the last 8, when they were influenced by people like Farage. And as someone that's spent the last 4 years documenting virtually every single instance. But we've got a much bigger problem than the Conservative Party at the moment. We've seen it on our streets over the last couple of weeks. And for the first time in many, many years, I've been genuinely afraid of addressing it. I mean, things were pretty bad under the Tory party. And this is all going to sound conspiratorial, but it actually happened to me and a number of other people that do what I do. When you criticise certain Tory MPs, you'd see a sharp uptick in a particular type of threat and a particular type of activity, like attempted hackings on your banks or your emails, some of which would come from or be made to look like they were from Russia. Usually when criticising Tory MPs that were associated with certain millionaire hedge funders that may or may not have cashed in as the pound crashed after the Brexit referendum result. But we're dealing with an entirely different kind of beast here, and we're dealing with people that have managed to actively radicalise people into physical violence. Anyone that calls out the government or the right tends to kind of, and I'm not even being melodramatic, takes their lives into their hands to some extent. But for women, that's a million times worse. Because we already live in fear of male violence most days anyway. In the past, my attitude was, they'd never get away with it. I'd be avenged, wouldn't I? In the past, I'd make, silly little jokes about, being found in an asphyxie wank gone wrong or being tunnelled a la Diana, purely as a joke. But this is an entirely different problem. You see, what we're dealing with here at the moment is what appears to be, unfortunately, a far-right network, not just in Britain, but internationally, all linked. And the danger of calling that out is immense, because these people were so radicalised by conspiracy that they see anyone that goes against them as a threat and as the enemy. Even the white women that they claim that they're protecting. Ironic and terrifying. Because it isn't about women. It isn't about little girls. Ultimately, all it's about is their racism, their ideology. And it largely falls under the bracket of far-right extremism. And unfortunately, we may have seen domestic terrorism being committed on our shores by people that were chanting "Stop the boats," which was the campaign slogan of the last Tory government. And where is the former Prime Minister and the interim leader of that Conservative Party? He's dining out in Michelin-star restaurants in America and letting people like Farage look like the opposition. The Tories have lost all control. They're watching this all play out, trying to figure out whether or not they continue to do what they've been doing for the last 8 years, which is parroting the lines of Farage, fueling xenophobia, Islamophobia, racism by othering and blaming marginalised communities to conceal what they've been doing, which is inflicting untold levels of poverty on the country. In the meantime, what happens? Farage fills the fucking gap because he's an opportunist. He is able to get far-right conspiracy theories in the news, things like two-tier policing. When all the studies have shown that there's no such thing as two-tier policing that negatively impacts white people. But nobody following him or following the rhetoric of reform or following the rhetoric of other far-right commentators are ever going to listen to reason. And that's why the Mail and the Express have suddenly gone all, the counter-protest saved the day, pretending to be all sunshine and roses, right? Because they've incited this. They've repeated the rhetoric of Farage. They've made millions of people think that asylum seekers and people of colour broadly are the issue and that they're committing all the crimes because they have magnified any instance of crime committed by those demographics. And they've incessantly promoted Farage. Why? Because to them, he is good copy. And to them, good copy is money. Outrage and sensationalisation makes them money. Populist figures makes them money, and all they care about is money. That's all billionaire newspaper barons care about. They don't care about the damage that they're doing to a country that they don't even live in, but yet they manage to control the national conversation of. And now we see it with Sky News and the BBC. Through a veil of respectability and always just about managing to keep beyond the line of culpability in the things that he incites, Farage is able to get nonsense conspiracy theories like the Great Replacement theory, like the two-tier policing theory, into the mainstream and get it on Sky News, get it on the BBC at 10. You've got people like the former chief of counter-terrorism directly accusing him of incitement. Doesn't stop him, doesn't stop them. The people running newspapers are responsible. No one knows how people react and human psychology better than them. So they create headlines to farm outrage and sensationalism, knowing that most people will not really read the article beyond the headline, no matter which side they're on. They'll very quickly form an opinion and then they will react. A notion that is mirrored on social media. Confirmation bias, sunk cost fallacy, footballification, comes down to tribalism, group mentality, mob mentality. It's kind of a form of psychological warfare, really. Farage sells papers, in some ways because they've made him the figure that sells papers, but he sells them nonetheless. And then the news broadcasters follow suit because they think people will tune in, because they either love the guy or they hate him. They don't care about what they're doing to the fabric of society. They don't care about the fact that that guy is very strongly linked to far-right figures. The whole Trump, Robinson, Tate, Farage crossover is real, all of which peddle conspiracies, all of which have a lot of power and influence and a lot of money, all of which are sadly radicalising the people that follow them, all of which are unfortunately involved in this situation that we're seeing in Britain, which I fear is a deliberate attempt to destabilise Britain, because we have a government that isn't going to toe the line. A government that they think is weak and easy to undermine because they're not right-wing, they're not rich. Most of this Labour government didn't go to private school. So yeah, part of it could be motivated by class and not seeing people with what they perceive to be lower status as being as powerful or as strong. They don't care if people get murdered espousing the views that they've promoted. Look at Farage, look at Brexit, look at the person that murdered Joe Cox. Unfortunately, the people that follow these people unquestioningly will end up doing stretches in prison for them, and they probably won't even be able to explain why they did it, because that's what radicalised people do, and that's what extremists do, and that's why it's an incredibly scary time for anyone that's calling it out. And that's why for the first time in a long time, I've actually seriously reconsidered talking about what I talk about, because the risks are immense and they're even bigger if you're a woman. And then there's also the aspect of you thinking, will I make a difference? With all this going on, will I even make a shred of difference to the landscape? Because it's out of control and I honestly don't know how to stop it. You're going up against the richest people, the most powerful people, men in the world, who are unfortunately, possibly influenced by foreign powers, who are trying to destabilise your country. How do you solve a problem like Farage? Press reform? Media reform? Will it stop it? How do you de-radicalise millions of people? What I will say is he knows exactly what he's doing. Sadly, so do some of the people that probably follow him. And they just don't care.